So I try to be a good teacher and always write down what we are supposed to do on a given Thursday and whatnot. So the program for today starts with the classification. Classification of what? Classification of cryptography, of the field of cryptography. Then some basics about cryptographic setups. Basics. So I call it basic and setup, so das Arrangement, if you wish. And then we will do an actual cipher, and then you want to do the substitution cipher. And this is something you essentially know from the first homework. I know about whatever 1/3 or so of you already did the first homework. And towards the end, I want to talk a little bit about the different ways of attacking crypto systems. So all of that is heavily unmathematical and essentially kind of a real introduction without too much mathematics, without too much theory and everything. Okay, so if you wish, it's kind of an interesting lecture, but it's in terms of really deep learning experience and knowledge building, it's more moderate. There will be more challenging lectures to come. Okay, so we start with the first section is classification of our field. Classification. Okay. And maybe let's first look at questions, modern applications of cryptography. Here's a question for you. So tell me applications that you know, maybe applications that you use that have cryptography on board, and again, answers can be in German. Okay, yeah. What's that? Okay. So this one is GNU GPG. And that's used for what?
It's for PGP keys to crypt your mails.
Yes, you can encrypt texts. You know, it's like PC laptop encryption. Next example, yeah. TrueCrypt, yeah. I don't know whether that's the right spelling, but yeah.
It's the first G has to become UPG.
This? I'm learning every day. Okay. Yeah. What is the application? True. Yeah, hard drive encryption. Very good. Next example. Yeah. Secure shell, yeah. For remote file transfer, blah, 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 right? Yeah. Yeah, Thunderbird doesn't have crypto, yeah. Yeah, okay, so plug in for Thunderbird. Okay, yeah. S-MIME encryption, email encryption, right? S-MIME email encryption. I'm listening. Yeah, letzte Reihe, last row. Very good. Very good. This is all PC stuff, right? It's boring. It's not really boring, but it's a cell phone. Okay. Good. Yeah. What was that? HCDCP multimedia protection. Very good. More examples, yeah. Very good. Yeah. What's it? Virtual private networks. This is like if you work for a company and you're like, let's say, a traveling salesman, or Außendienstmitarbeiter, and you have a laptop and you want to log into your company network, you use something like a VPN, yeah? What was it? E-passport, yeah. Does any e-passport, you know, who has a modern passport with a chip on board, electronic passport? Very few. Do you know what's happened on November 1st, which is in, what is that, 10 days from today or 9 days from today? There starts the electronic citizen card, elektronischer Personalausweis. Okay, this is full of crypto. Okay, one more, okay, yeah. Online banking, very good. Okay. So what you see, what is very interesting, and I love your input here at this point, is we started with, and it was kind of PC-centric, which is great because it's, you know, like the internet and PCs being, they're very, very important for cryptography. But then what we also have here, there's some, yeah, multimedia protection is also like a network-centric application. But then you see a whole bunch of other applications which are not internet and not laptop and not PC, but you do need crypto, right? This is a cell phone. This is actually what's one of the first, maybe one of the first, and definitely the largest application of cryptography in consumer products was in cell phone. Was the GSM has voice encryption. So if you a GSM cell phone, which all of us have, and pretty much everybody in the world except outside North America, you have crypto on board. Bank cards is a great one. You know, it's also, this is clearly not a PC application. VPN is PC. Electronic passport, electronic citizen card, elektronischer Personalausweis is an embedded application. Online banking is again networking. So what we see is a lot here. Actually, you forgot two of the like sexiest toys, you know, people at your age and my age can think of, is the iPod. You've heard about iPods. I mean, okay, are we running? Does this work again? Yeah, everybody back on. Okay. iTunes is essentially one large DRM, digital rights management application. You know, it's all about copyright protection, preventing guys like you and me to, you know, buy iTunes songs and, you know, sell them again or distribute them freely. So they are for and kind of the counterpart to this music video one is in the e-book market, which is huge in the US. The Kindle, who knows the Kindle? Is that known here in Germany? Who knows the Kindle? This is huge. This is the Amazon e-reader, okay? In the second quarter 2010, so that means April, May, June 2010, so very real, you know, 3 months ago. Amazon.com, Amazon US, sold more Kindle e-books than hardcover books. Wow, right? This is a really strong statement. So, and I'm not saying whether this is good and bad, I'm just saying there are killer applications, the consumer market, which are completely dependent on crypto here. This is all crypto. I mean, to make a long story short, this is all crypto. It's not all crypto. There's a lot of other stuff happening too. The new business model and exciting new technology. There's a lot of cryptography and data security happening here, believe me. Okay, so crypto is cool and you're studying the right thing. This is what I tried to say here at this point. Okay, so so you probably believe me by now that crypto is important. So the question is, what is cryptography and what is part of cryptography? And now if we start really look at the different aspects, the different branches, you know, the parts of cryptography, what you will see that the main terms, the main notion is not even cryptography, but cryptology. So, and cryptology itself splits into two sub-branches, and the important one, if you wish, is cryptography. And the other big branch is cryptanalysis. Okay. And does anyone know what is cryptography and what is cryptanalysis? Does anybody have an opinion? Yeah. Yeah. He says cryptanalysis attacks the cryptography and that's it. Okay, so this is the good guys, people try to encrypt something, like do email encryption, and these are the people who try to break that. And what should come somewhat as a surprise at this point that I include that into scientific classification or something. You would think, oh, this is only what the good guys do, and this is like, hackers do, Russian mafia or maybe intelligence services who, try to read other people's email. So this shouldn't be here on the blackboard. This is essentially criminals. Why does Professor Paar write that down? And we'll discuss that in a few minutes, okay? So this course will mainly deal with cryptography. We'll always allude to cryptanalysis, so that is an important part, but we will mainly be here. So now let's drill a little bit deeper into what cryptography is about, okay? Cryptography not classically, but kind of the modern view of cryptography, so that's a view that's maybe 10 years old. There's three main parts of it. There is symmetric algorithms, okay, abbreviated SIM-ALG, symmetric algorithms. There are, surprise, surprise, asymmetric algorithm. Or you might have heard the term public key cryptography. And this is the same. Asymmetric cryptography equals public key cryptography. Okay, it's the same thing. There's no difference. And then, and some of you might have heard about these three parts here. And then the modern notion is that there is really a third part of cryptography, which will deal with protocols. Okay. So what we are going to do in this lecture, and when I say this lecture, I don't only mean Introduction to Cryptography 1, but Introduction to Cryptography 1 and 2. So this is a sequence of 2 semesters, right? We are, day 1 of Intro Crypto, but there's a follow-up was in the summer semester. So what we're going to do in these 2 semesters, we treating, we are here. This is October 22nd, 2010. And this is the timeline here, and we go up to here. Okay, so this will be July 2010. Okay, so this is why I'm saying that. We first do symmetric algorithm, then we do asymmetric, and then we do a little bit of protocols. Okay. Where the focus is probably depend how you define what a protocol is. It's probably more like 35 to 40% here, 35 to 40% here, and then 20 to 30% protocol. So really the focus is on symmetric crypto and asymmetric crypto, and then kind of the last third of the lecture we talk about things such as digital signatures and hash function. We do also real protocols. Okay, so but this is roughly the timeline. Okay, okay. So what is important to bear in mind? If you look at the name of your program of study, your bachelor program, it's not called Bachelor in Cryptography, but Bachelor in IT Security. So it's really a little bit of a question, what is the relationship of crypto and security? Okay, and long story made short is that security is somewhat a much bigger topic area notion, And one part of security is cryptography, okay? And if you could achieve security only through cryptography, you wouldn't need a bachelor program. You take this 2-semester class and you're done, and you go in industry and become rich and famous and stuff. This is not true. So this is essentially what we're doing here. And of course, there's a follow-up course. We do introduction to cryptography, and later on there's a more theoretical crypto course in your program. But in addition, there are many, many, many aspects you need for building a secure program, including applications such as this. You need, for instance, secure software, you need secure operation systems, you need secure hardware. So a lot of aspects that we don't address here to build an overall application. But nevertheless, in order to build something secure, you need more than crypto. But at the same time, it's also true that there's essentially no security, or very, very few security applications that don't have cryptography on board. Do you understand the relationship? So you do need cryptography as an atomic element in order to build security, but you also need stuff around. But if you only take the stuff around without crypto, you cannot build anything secure. Okay, so you always need security. That's why we do that in the first semester, because this is really the foundation of modern security design, security engineering. Okay, so this was a lengthy introduction and lengthy classification, right? This is number one, is classification. So the next topic is number two. Oh yeah, so if you go back here to our to-do list for today, we're done with the first one, okay? This is this diagram. I warned you, it's not very deep, the material today, right? I'm just talking a lot, and I like to talk, as you can tell. So, the second topic is the setup for symmetric cryptography. Okay, so there are many, many, many things you can do in cryptography, and we do that much later when we talk about digital signatures. This is somewhere in April or May. We do that more formally. We talk about security services. Right now, we start with something a very simple problem. Namely, communication over insecure channel. Okay, so where do we draw that? Okay, so that means we have two parties, and party number A is called Alice. You got it? Party A, Alice, right? Yeah. And party B is called Bob. Okay, so two parties want to communicate with each other. Communication could mean email exchange, right? This is close to real life, right? We all send an email in our lives, right? So the problem is we are not really sure what's happening in between. So we have a channel in here, and channels nowadays tend to be open channels, which means insecure channels. Okay, so Alice wants to send a message in the channel, and Bob wants to, Bob is supposed to receive that. What are examples of channels here? This is a transmission media, I feel like fancy terminology. So, yeah. What's it? The website is not really the channel, and the website would be somewhere here, but then if you use a website, you're communicating over the... Good, okay, so channel examples. Of course, we all love the internet. Other examples? Other examples? Yeah. GSM airwaves. Yeah. Airwaves. GSM, there's another air link that you use all the time, probably at least 50% of you at home. Yeah. UMTS, yeah. WLAN, right. It's Wi-Fi, right. There's a whole bunch of other applications, okay. So all these modern channels have in common, they tend to be open channels. You know, there was an old day in the 70s where you could lease lines, you know, you could from the Deutsche Post, you could actually lease a link. You know, you could rent one point-to-point connection, and it was more or less closed. But the big success, as we know from the internet, is there's an open channel. Okay, so the problem is, and I'm going to add stuff to the picture. My request is, don't copy right now. Aufhören mitzuschreiben for 5 minutes. Okay, because I'm going to wipe stuff out, and this is really hard if you use a ballpoint pen. Okay, so here's the problem. Alice sends a message X, you know, which might be an email. Bob receives the email, which is exactly what we want to do. The problem is there might be an opponent, Gegner, opponent, which is often called Oscar in the literature. And Oscar might also get access to that. You know that you can trace the email, you can see where the email, the connection point of the email as it's being routed through the internet. And this is weird stuff happening, even if you send an email from, you know, Bochum to Cologne or something nearby. It could happen that this is not even staying within Germany, but sometimes leaving the country, sometimes even leaving Europe, and you know, some kind of wild routing of internet packages. So in general, we don't know what's happening on the channel here, whether anybody wiretaps. Wiretaps is, you know, to listening. So in order to prevent that, and that's the basic idea of cryptography, or in order to overcome, the alternative would be Alice takes the message and uses some kind of other channel, such as, you know, personal delivery of the message, you know, with a carrier or courier. Of course, you can do that, but you have to buy a DB ticket and everything is really slow. So we prefer to sending emails. So in order to overcome this problem now, that Oscar can read our messages, we can use cryptography, okay? And the basic idea is that we, at this point here, and this is why you weren't allowed to copy, you introduce encryption on the sender side. You encrypt, okay? What is encryption? Some kind of mathematical formula which turns X, the plain text, in some kind of ciphertext, Chiffrat in German. And to Oscar suddenly doesn't get X anymore. Oscar only sees Y, and the nice thing about good cryptography, to Oscar this looks like random bits. So he sees, in the case of email encryption, he suddenly sees random characters. Okay, this is exactly what we want. And then on the receiving side, of course, you know, what comes out of the channel, what comes out of the internet, what comes out of the airwaves maybe is, you know, scrambled messages. So Bob wants to recover that, so he has to decrypt with the decryption function D. Okay? And then, you know, D transforms Y, this seemingly random string of bits, into something nice and readable, namely X here. Okay, so that's a basic setup of crypto systems. Now comes the $64,000 question. So here we have an encryption function, right? We have a decryption function. What do you think? Is it a good idea to keep those functions secret? You know how we do that, or should we make that public? What is your gut feeling? Yeah? See? Yeah. So he's saying we should keep that open. So we should tell everybody how we encrypt and how we decrypt. Who has a different opinion? Who thinks it's a stupid idea? Yeah. Yeah. He said this is a stupid idea. If everybody knows how we encrypt and decrypt, Oscar also knows how we decrypt and he can read it. Okay? And these are two interesting opinions. Yep. Yeah, except we don't have a key in here. But this is, of course, this is the answer, right? But I pretend you're really dummies, but you're not. Okay, what? Yet the same?
I would say an open way to encrypt and an open key to encrypt the message and closed one to decrypt.
This is far too advanced. This is stuff for January. Okay, so we're not there yet. Yeah. But good idea, good idea. Okay, so we have kind of conflicting opinions here. You know, some of you say, let's keep that open, you know, let's make these algorithms public, you know, let's put them in my book, you know, let's put it on Wikipedia so everybody knows that. And then, of course, the counter argument is this is a really stupid idea. If everybody knows how to decrypt, Oscar could decrypt and do that, right? And so, and then if you look at the history of cryptography, cryptography started in, I don't know when it really started, but there have been early signs of cryptography 2000 before Christ in Egyptian times. You know, there were hieroglyphen, and they were like the normal hieroglyphs, but they were also encrypted hieroglyphs, right? So crypto is really old. And what people did for essentially until the early 1970s of, you know, the last century, so you know, until 40 years ago, people believed that it's a really good idea to keep those functions secret, right? And it turned out it's a really stupid idea. Okay, don't do that. And it's very counterintuitive. So from Gefühl her, we would assume that it's a good idea to keep that secret. And that's what mankind did for 4,000 years. They believed you get more secure systems, of course, you know, seemingly of course, if E and D are secret. And now it's a big, big question. If you've been asleep, wake up. Now comes one of the important discussions. You know, takes us about 2 minutes. Why is it a good idea to keep E and D public here? Why should we only use public encryption functions? Yeah. Exactly, because, yeah, so she said, this is the only way of knowing that the functions are secure. And now we get into some kind of a more lengthy discussion. There's something very, very specific, peculiar, speziell about cryptography, which is not true for almost all other engineering and scientific disciplines. Normally, if you have as an engineer, a computer scientist, you have a task such as building a car that only uses 3 liters of gasoline, 3-liter auto, right? You should build that. So what you do, you sit down and you build your engines in your very aerodynamic, you know, overall car and everything, and then you go on the road, and if the car consumes 2.9 liters, you know, you've won, you know, and your boss loves you, and if the car still, you know, uses 6 liters, you get fired, right? So you know what I'm saying? So it's pretty clear normally when you achieved your goal and when not. And this does not hold for crypto, okay? What I usually do at this point, I do a Gedankenexperiment. So I say, here's the deal, and it's only a Gedankenexperiment, it's not a real experiment. I say, okay, so your task is design a crypto system, okay? And I give you 48 hours, and whoever designs a really secure crypto system gets 10,000 euros from me, okay? Saturday 1 o'clock, okay? So what will happen, 150 people will, you know, run to and then you don't have internet access, so you have to come up with it by yourself, okay? Just paper and pencil. So I can tell you on Saturday I will have, you know, 150 people knocking on my door, you know, each has really nice Kästchenpapier, right? And they explain all this really great unbreakable crypto system, okay? And there are 2 reasons why you want to do that. Obviously, you want to get the 10,000 euros, right? Which is okay. We all like money, so you can try to do that. But the real dangerous thing is probably 2/3 or 3/4 of you will think, oh, this is really secure. You know, oh, I do this, and then I do this mathematical, and I have this matrix in there, and then I do this exchange and the permutation, and nobody can break that. And what will happen, every single one of the 150 crypto systems will probably be very, very insecure. Okay? Why is that? Because you're not an experienced cryptographer. I'm not a crypto designer. I don't design crypto algorithms, even though I've been doing that stuff for 15 years. It's really hard to build a secure crypto system. It's very easy to design something, to build something where you yourself really believe this is secure. Okay? And how do we get out of this situation? This happened over and over and over and over again, right? You know I'm sure I haven't. Do I have an Enigma picture here? Let me just see. I don't have a. You know who knows the German Enigma, this encryption machine? Yeah, I should have one on my slides. I'm sorry. So. Nazi Germany, they were really convinced they have something really secure. And, the Polish, English, and Americans were breaking the German traffic, right? They were really deeply convinced that this is secure, and it was not secure, okay? So how do we get out of the situation? The only way of assuring that encryption and decryption are really strong functions is by publicizing them. So you make them public, you put them on your website, in practice you write scientific papers and you present them at conferences, hoping that other people that do cryptanalysis, you see that up there, right, on your right, cryptanalytical people try to break your encryption function, okay? And then what we hope, if they don't succeed after 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or maybe after 10 years, and hopefully really smart people try to break that, but they didn't succeed, they couldn't break it, then, well, we trust the algorithm. So it's more like a gut feeling. There's except in very few instances, there's no mathematical proof that a crypto algorithm is secure. We can only get this, warm, fuzzy feeling, well, nobody could break it, so probably it's unbreakable, computation unbreakable. Okay, so let's maybe write that down. Here, maybe here as a side note, okay. In practice, never use an untested crypto algorithm. Okay. And this happened over and over and over again in real life, that people do that and it's not secure. I've done a fair amount of work with industry in cryptography, and there have been a few cases where people actually gave me access to their own homemade crypto, and we could break it every single instances. And I'm not a big cryptanalytical guy. I'm not a world famous breaker of crypto system. This is so easy to build really bad crypto. So don't do that. Okay, so you essentially only use the algorithms that are standardized, that are in all the algorithms in my book. But everything that's standardized nowadays is secure. Okay, so. That was kind of an interesting discussion, hopefully. So the question is now, if this were everything to the system, then we would have a major problem at this point. Namely, so this is public, encryption, decryption is public too. So nothing prevents Oscar from taking the decryption algorithm, putting D in here, and Oscar would be able to read the messages, right? And what is missing in this drawing here? And we had said, yeah. Exactly. So what we do is there's another parameter, another number, another input to this encryption function, which is called the key, which we abbreviate by K. And so the encryption not only depends on the message X, on the plaintext X, but also on the key. And the key really becomes important on the receiver side, namely Bob can only run the decryption algorithm if he has the identical key. Okay, so only if Bob has the same key, he can decrypt. Okay, and maybe at this point, let's introduce some notation. Okay, so X is called plain text. Das ist Klartext in German, okay, plain text. Or clear text, sometimes called clear text. Then ciphertext, which is Chiffrat. I mentioned that before in German. What else do we have? E is the encryption function. Encryption function. Accordingly, D is our decryption function. We need the key is K is the key, okay. And and we will discuss that in half an hour or so. Does anyone know what is one way of breaking such a crypto system? What is one like very simple way? Yeah. Brute force. What is brute force attack? Yeah. If you look there, typically there is almost always there is not infinite many keys, but there's a finite number of keys. You know, for instance, if you have only, let's say, 1,000 keys, and then one way of breaking that is you take your Y and you simply decrypt Y with all possible keys. You know, start with key number 1, key number 2, key number 3, up to key 1,000, and then every time you get a plain text out and you check whether the plain text might make sense. You know, in the case of email encryption, maybe. So, another parameter that plays a role here is how many keys there are in the system, right? And this is called the key space, and this is in literature sometimes uses diagrams, you know, this is bars, which stand for cardinality, you know, Menge von, or sometimes also in the crypto literature, it's also written with a calligraphic K, kalligraphisches K, like Schreibschrift K, okay. And this is the key space. This is this is a in simpler words, this is number of keys. Okay, so these are the 5 basic parameters, and we're going to use them every single week we meet from now on. Okay, so so far so good. But there's still something missing in this picture here, or it's maybe not missing, but before, you know, what do Alice and Bob have to do? What do the two parties have to do in order to actually, before they have the system set up? Yeah. They have to share the key, right? You have to get the key over, right? The most elegant method would be, before you do encryption, decryption, Alice is just sending the key over the insecure channel, and why is that a really stupid idea? Yeah. Exactly, because Oscar would get the key, right? So we can't do that, and this is actually a major, major problem. You know, this beautiful, simple solution is a stupid solution, right? So what we do is we need some other way of exchanging the key, and kind of in an abstract way, you can, you know, imagine a secure channel here. And again, secure channel is pretty abstract, sounds really fancy. That can be a letter in the mail. You know, this is, for instance, how if you do e-banking, how the passwords, you know, the one-time keys for e-banking are being distributed. You get them by mail, right? Or it could be the telephone, that you agree with somebody on the phone. You know, so this might be the internet, that might be a telephone line where you agree with somebody on a secret key. Or that could be a person traveling between Alice and Bob and hand delivering keys. So all kind of, you know, stupid ideas can happen here. Okay, so I wrote this kind of reminder here in the beginning after this discussion. Be really careful with choosing only proven algorithms. Don't come up with your own encryption scheme. It's a really bad idea. There's a somewhat more formal definition of that, and this is very important. This is called Kerckhoffs's principle. Kerckhoffsche Prinzip. That was a Dutch cryptographer who worked in France, I believe, and that was postulated in 1883. Okay, so what he was the first person, and again, crypto started 2000 before Christ. So really old. By this time, people have been doing encryption and decryption for about 4,000 years, right? And they did it essentially wrong. The way we look at modern cryptography, at modern security, they did the wrong thing. They kept the encryption and decryption function secret. So what August Kerckhoff said is, it's an O here, these are the rules of the game. He essentially completely changed the rules of the game. He said a crypto system should be secure even if the attacker that's Oscar in our example, even if the attacker Oscar knows all the details about the system with, and there's only one thing that he doesn't know, namely the key, okay, with the exception of the secret key. Okay. Okay. And if you decide on the weekend that you don't like IT security and that you prefer to study computer science or mechanical engineering or French literature, this is the one thing you may want to take home for the rest of your life. Okay? So this is kind of the most important message almost of this whole lecture. And it's like often in life, it's not a, once you know it, it's not particularly complicated, but, mankind did it wrong for 4,000 years. Okay? And actually, even after that, it took about another 90 years till people really vitally appreciated that and really believe this is the way we want to build a crypto system nowadays. Okay, so it's remark here at this point. Kerckhoffs's principle is counterintuitive. That means this is not the normal way of thinking. This is, and I got a lot of good, very correct answers before when I asked you, should we keep E and D public or keep it secret? And most people said, let's make it public because you know too much about modern cryptography already. The normal way of thinking is, this is stupid. The normal way of thinking is, let's keep encryption and decryption secret, okay? And then the whole system becomes more secure. The problem is once people, and this is actually true as long as your attacker doesn't know what END is, okay, what the encryption, decryption is. Once the attacker get hold of END, and this happens nowadays in all these public applications, of course, once they get hold of END, the whole system becomes broken, okay? So that's really the reason. So nowadays, we have to use Kerckhoffs's principle. Okay, so this takes care of item number 2 on our to-do list for today. And what should we do next? We'll probably move to the next blackboard here, and let's start with that would be, section or chapter, what whatever you want to call that. Now we want to look at an example for an encryption and decryption function, and we start with something very, very simple, namely the substitution cipher, okay? So what is the substitution cipher? Some remarks, okay? That's an historical cipher. And when people say historical cipher, they mean old and stupid ciphers, okay? So these are all unsecure ciphers that people used for hundreds of years, and they all can more or less easily be broken, okay? So and a very polite way of naming them is to call them historical ciphers, okay? What is kind of interesting is until not that long ago, so a few decades, again, maybe 30, 40 years ago, all crypto systems, and obviously that means that we talk about 4,000 years, for most of the last 4,000 years, people built ciphers that were surprisingly that didn't operate on bits and bytes, maybe not surprisingly, but they operated on ladders. So the operates on ladders. Essentially was voice encryption, or not voice, text encryption, right? So encrypted ladder-wise, which is none of the modern ciphers encrypt ladder-wise. They all encrypt bitwise or bytewise, on digital data. What is the idea? And you all know the substitution cipher because that's homework assignment number 1, and you already started working on that. The idea is, very, very simple and intuitive. Replace every plain text letter by a fixed ciphertext ladder. Okay. Example at this point. So so it means our key is this substitution. Your substitution is fancy word for replacement, ersetzen, right? So you have some kind of replacement rule. So we need a rule, and it could be that this is plain text. The uppercase are plain text in our notation. For instance, the uppercase A is replaced by a lowercase l. The plain text B is, every time you see B in the plain text, you always replace it by a D. C is replaced by W, and so forth, okay? Very simple idea, and people have been using that for hundreds of years, okay? So, as an example, if you want to encrypt the word ABBA, you would need your substitution table, right? And then you look, you know, A is replaced by L, B is replaced by D, B is replaced by D, A is replaced by L. That would be the ciphertext. Okay, very simple. Why am I doing that? Not only to show you, you know, an example of a stupid way of doing cryptography, but really the interesting thing comes now, the next 10 minutes or so, is how can we break that? Okay, and this is a homework assignment, and I think there is a, and I'm not going to show you the algorithm, the methods in detail, but I think there will be a very healthy discussion coming out of that. So maybe one question that we have at this point here is the cipher secure? Any guesses? I know I have half a dozen solutions to the homework already, right? So people broke that. So is it secure? What is your gut feeling here? I want to have a 0-1 statement, yes or no. Okay, so who's in favor of no? No. Who thinks this is secure and wants to be kicked out of this university? Okay, so okay, good. Everybody thinks this is secure. It's not secure, right? So the way and now what I want to discuss now is different principal ways of attacking that. So maybe a question here: how can we attack the cipher? Okay, and kind of the simplest attack, and we already mentioned that before, is when we talked about the key space here, is we can simply try all possible keys, right? And this is almost like a reflex. If you see a crypto system, you want to break that, it's probably a good idea to first look at the key space, and can't we do a brute force attack? So let's start with, you know, first is the, I'll do that on a different blackboard, okay? So, first attack is brute force attack. Or exhaustive key search. This is a somewhat fancier term. Vollständige Schlüsselsuche in German, exhaustive key search. So you try all possible keys. And the question is, how many keys do we have here? And this is not, in most modern ciphers, in most modern symmetric ciphers and symmetric cryptography, you normally only look how many bits you have. And if you have 64 key bits, you have 2 to the 64 possible keys, end of discussion. Okay? Here it's a little bit more complicated. If you look at this lookup table, you see that where, you know, A equals to L, B maps to D, C maps to W, and so forth. We have to look how many of these tables can we compute. Okay? And how do we do that? Well, when you start first with the letter A from the alphabet. And up there, we said A maps to L, but L is only one possibility. How many possibilities do we have? Yeah. 26, exactly. So for the letter A, we have 26 possibilities. In this example, we picked L. So now comes the letter B. How many possibilities do we have? Yeah. 25, because we used one up, right? So for letter B, we have 24. Then the letter C, 25. The letter C, how many possibilities do we have? 24. You get the idea, right? So that's 26 factorial, 26 Fakultät. This is not very, yeah, so you have to look at the formula. There's a formula which approximates that. This is something 2 to the 88. Dr. Tim Gunesi showed you our Copacabana, our key breaking machine, which is like the most powerful machine built at universities worldwide. We can barely do 2 to the 56. Maybe we can do 2 to the 60, right? So this is let's do that this way. So this is 2 to the 30. Okay. So 2 to the 56 takes us a few days to search with this Copacabana toy that we have, right? Which is really complicated to build. 2 to the 88 is 2 to the 32 times as hard as doing this key search, okay? Do you know what the absolute value is for that? This is roughly... Okay, so this is 1 billion times as hard as doing a Copacabana key search for a small cipher with 56 bits. Do you know what I'm saying? So if Copacabana does this in 1 day, 56 bits, Copacabana, in order to do a cipher with this complexity, you will need 1 billion days, okay? So 2 to the 88 we cannot do nowadays. Nobody can do that, not even, really CIA and the National Security Agency. They cannot do 2 to the 88. It's really painful, okay? You can't do this amount of computation. So what we can say from here, key space is too large. That means we cannot run an exhaustive key search, okay? So this attack doesn't work, okay? And we don't expect you to do an exhaustive key search for the first homework assignment. That doesn't even work, right? That would be a very mean homework assignment. Any ideas for the second attack? What else can we try? So, yeah, you again? Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So what you do, you look how. What is interesting is here, kind of the problem with the cipher, and this is why it's a stupid cipher, is you have a fixed lookup table, right? This is a fixed assignment. That means every time an A shows up, you'll see an L here, right? Okay, now we know ABBA, and there might be not that many possibilities, and you might think, okay, in a random text, this is not very useful, but it is very useful because if you look, because letters are not... Yeah. So what you see here is letters are not equally likely, okay? In languages, European languages at least, they're heavily, unequally distributed. And what you see, for instance, here in English and German is almost the same probability. The letter E is the most common one, and you see the frequency in percent. So 13% of all letters is an E, okay? That means about every 7th letter that you get, every 7th to 8th letter is an E, okay? And if we're equally distributed, you would think every 26th letter is an E, right? But an E is very, very frequent. And then in English, a T, which is different in German, I don't have the German table in my head, a T is the next common one and so forth, and you see, towards the end, it becomes less and less likely. So what you can do is you do a letter frequency analysis. That means you look at the ciphertext and you count the frequency of your ciphertext symbols, of the ciphertext letters. And if you suddenly, for instance, let's say here, if we had at this point maybe, let's say E is mapped to Q, okay? You look at your ciphertext and suddenly, and you do a Strichliste, right? You keep counting how frequent each letter is, and suddenly 13% of your letters are Qs, right? Q is kind of a rare exotic letter in English too. Is that some? Yeah, it's like the second least likely one, right? So suddenly you see Q occurs with 13% likelihood. It's most likely in E, so you replace Q by E, and you immediately have 13% of your letters right. okay? So the ones that are easy to get are also the most important ones because they come up all the time, right? And I never dared to give that really as a homework assignment for students when I taught I taught crypto for 7 years in the US, in Massachusetts. And when I started here in Bochum in 2001, I thought, let's try that. And it was the first time I gave, essentially your first homework assignment, I gave to a class of students. But in the beginning, we were really scared that it's still much, much harder, you know, if you don't give side information. So we gave all kind of tips and pointers how it's really easy to break. And it turned out then the first week, when they had to hand in the homework assignment, same situation like here, you know, 150 people in the room, everybody solved that. And then the next year, you know, we made it harder and harder, and every year people can solve it. So it turns out this type of attack, looking at the ladder frequency distribution, is very powerful. There's a question. But it's the same. So he's asking for special characters and numbers. It really depends on what you would probably do. Let's say the normal, the systematic way of is extending both alphabets. So you're not going from A to Z, but you're going from A to Z and then 0, 1, 2, 3 up to 9. You know what I'm saying? But then also here on the replacement side, on the ciphertext side, you're not only using lowercase a, b, c, d up to z, but lowercase a, b, c, and then also use 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. Is that okay? Okay. Okay, so the second attack which works is ladder frequency analysis. And why does this work? Works because identical plain text map to identical ciphertexts. Symbols. Okay, so. And again, you still have fun for the homework. You know, you have another week to finish that and to actually break that text. So what I want to do now, and that's the last topic for today, and that's a simple one, is this discussion wasn't really all that complicated. Okay, so we looked at this very simple cipher, and first we looked, can we break that with brute force? And it turns out we cannot. There are far too many possibilities to do this lookup, right? To this substitution, this one-to-one mapping here. So, and then that was the first attack. And then we tried the second attack, and it works. Okay, so far so good, and everybody could follow, hopefully, right? It wasn't too complicated. I think there's a bigger lesson to be learned, and this is now the fourth topic, is namely, and it's as often as in life, it's a very simple statement, namely, as an attacker, you could be frustrated. You could say, oh, I cannot break that, you know, my special purpose, you know, my crypto hardware machine is too slow, you know, and I'm really depressed, blah, 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 blah. You wouldn't be, right? Because an attacker, it's sufficient if you succeed with one attack. You know what I'm talking about here, right? So, and this is an attacker's point of view. An attacker will not be frustrated about this. He will be happy that he has a nice attack that works, right? And now, this is the cryptanalysis side. You know, this is the right-hand side of this drawing. But we are typically the good guys here, right? So now, if you design a crypto system, this is really bad for you, because if you design a crypto system that withstands this attack, you know, I think, oh, this is really great, and you know, key space of 2 to the 88, and Professor Paar said it's really secure, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't help you if there's another attack where you can succeed, okay? So what you have to do as a crypto designer, you have to make sure that you're secure against every single attack, and if there's only one attack that is successful, your whole system collapses, and this is very frustrating, okay? This makes crypto really hard, and therefore I want to do it at the end in order to, you know, to frustrate you more, to show you about all, kind of give you a little bit of classification of crypto attacks. Okay. So this would be number 4. Okay. There are often many possible attack approaches, maybe that's a good word. It's a little awkward, but approaches. A fancy word for like this different types of attacking a system, if you really, like fancy terminology, is attack vectors. Attack vectors. Okay, and I will show you a little bit of a diagram. So this. What is contained in the world of cryptanalysis and breaking crypto system? There's definitely the classical cryptanalysis, and there's not a good word for it right now. I call it classical. There's not a good word. What I mean by classical cryptanalysis, this is Christof's definition here, is essentially these two attacks that you see above on the board, namely this is brute force, which is the one classical one. This always existed. People always tried it, and sometimes they succeed with that. And then the other one, which is probably the more important one in practice, is analytical attacks. So you do an analysis, an analyse of the system. So you're not treating it. What you do with brute force attack, your cipher, your crypto system is a black box. You simply try all possible keys, and you observe input and output. This is a real classical black box setting. With analytical attacks, you really look at the functioning, it's the inside of the cipher, what's happening inside. And this, for instance, that we observed here that ladder frequencies are maintained. Okay, so and this is normally what cryptographer says. These are the two types of attacks, and end of story. Okay, unfortunately, in the real world, if you're not only looking at the crypto algorithm but at the kind of a real setting, you have other attacks too. Okay, one attack which is it's maybe an example for my start with here with my my Geldkarte, okay, my German ATM card here, right? And there's a Geldkarte, so it's an electronic wallet function. So that's a good story. Yeah. Can I ask who's using the Geldkartenfunktion of your bank card? As about very few, 10%. Okay, 50% of people. I use it to buy stamps, so I like that. So what you can do is, in case you didn't know, the other 85% of people here in the room, so you can go to your ATM machine, your Bankautomaten, and put money from your Girokonto, from your checking account, onto here, up to 200 euros, and then you can spend it anonymously, more or less. Okay, so of course it's tempting to upload the card in your lab, okay, or in your home, without an ATM machine. You know what I'm saying? So it might be very tempting to upload it to 200 euros without taking the money from your account. After all, they're just bits in some kind of memory location, right? If you manage to flip the right bits, you suddenly have 200 euros more. Everybody's following me? So that would be an attack. So money is represented by digital data on here. It's kind of a weird thing, right? It's not, here, this is not digital, right? This is physical, real paper. It's actually not, it's fabric, right? 20 euros on here is digital data, some electrons in some kind of EEPROM, okay? So it's very tempting to flip those bits here, okay? So what you have to do, you have to overcome the crypto on board here. Crypto is very hard. So one thing you could try is to do brute force. I think they run triple DES. This is something like 112 bits. You can never do that, okay? Brute force would be 2 to the 112. Analytical attacks, again, if there's triple DES on board, people have been trying to break that for 40 years. This is not going to work, okay? So what else can we do? Well, one thing is somebody knows, probably in your bank, somebody somewhere hidden is the key, and somebody probably knows the secret key. So one thing of doing that, you go to that person, say, here, I can upload 200 euros, so I give you 100 euros and you give me the secret key, right? They will not do that, they work at banks, they make a lot of money, So what you have to do, you probably have to increase the amount, right? You say, okay, I don't give you 100, I give you 1,000, or maybe give you 100,000 or 1,000,000, and at some point, maybe some people become corrupt, right? So what you can do here at this point, you can try social engineering. Okay? And this is an extreme example, because in practice it might be very hard, to bribe a German bank official. Okay, but the other types of social engineering attacks, you probably heard about this. There's these studies where and people did that in the real world. If you want to have your password, which is really your crypto key, for your GNU implementation, particularly in a professional setting, so you call somebody at the workplace and say, here, here's your IT department, your IT infrastructure, your system administrator. We need your password urgently because we do some kind of update to your system, or you have a virus, we need your password. And you only hear the person on the phone, and if you're in a big company, you probably don't know the person, and there's a lot of people that give out their password over the phone, right? These are all social engineering attacks. So again, you can have very strong crypto on board. If you give away your password to a phone, to a trickster, you have a problem. But this is not all. So this is, one big class are the real crypto attacks. There's the social engineering attacks. Phishing is another one. And the third class, which is the least known, which is probably the most modern type of attacks, are the so-called implementation attacks. This is kind of the speciality of my group, of my research group here. What you use I give you an example, okay? So again, there are 112 super secure bits on there. We would like to have them. One way of trying to do that is you take your Geldkarte, there's the golden contacts, right? What's hidden under the golden contact is a tiny, 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 tiny computer, 8-bit microprocessor, 8051 type, okay? Which runs triples the DES, which runs the crypto algorithm, okay? So what we would really like to have is the key. There's a key, which is somehow really very, very well in a hidden memory location. It's really hard to read that out. So what people discovered in the mid to late 1990s, that's their whole way of attacking the system if you take the platform into account. If you really consider this not as an abstract formula, but you look at the real hardware that's running here. Okay? And one thing you can do, you take an oscilloscope, you connect that to the power pins here. Now you run the algorithm. You buy at eBay, you can buy a card reader for about 9 euros, okay? You trigger the card, you say encrypt. You essentially say, I'm a bank machine, I'm an ATM machine, encrypt, okay? You start encrypting. What you do is, you record, aufnehmen, you record the power trace here. Okay, the Stromverbrauch, the power consumption. Okay. It turns out that the power consumption of this microcontroller, of this small microprocessor, has something to do with the key that's being processed. Okay, this is called side channel. Analysis. And that can be very powerful. Unfortunately, for all of us in this room, you know, in the German banking standard, they know about the side channel attacks, so they have, again, countermeasures against that. Okay, they use masking, the random values, blah, blah, blah. So it doesn't work. But if you have unprotected hardware, that means if you have hardware that didn't protect against the side channel attacks, it's super, super easy to extract the keys. That's unbelievable. So this is one example for implementation attacks. There are many, many, many other implementation attacks. I'll give you another example is, you do a computation either here, but also, let's say, on a laptop, okay? And you look at the timing behavior, and it turns out that the timing also depends on the key bits typically, okay? And then again, there are attacks that explore the timing behavior, and if you know, you do typical signal processing techniques, and out of the timing curves, you can compute the key, okay? So this is a third type of attack. And now the last words of the lecture is, as an attacker, it is sufficient to succeed with one of these attacks, okay? For an attacker, you can try all possibilities, and there may be more, okay? As a defender, as somebody who designs a crypto system, you're really in a bad spot. You really have the hard job, namely you have to protect against all these attacks, and maybe the hardest is maybe there are more attacks that are not on this blackboard here. Okay, this is really hard. That's it for today. Thank you very much.